Going to be our
There.
celebration. We ready to roll?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, great. Good afternoon to the community of Millis and to everybody who's joined the call thus far and will continue to join or maybe watching from home. I'm Loring Barnes. I'm the chair of the Millis Select Board. I want to acknowledge my colleagues who will be helping to lead this conversation. James McCaffrey, our vice chair, and Peter Germain, our clerk, as well as the town administrator, Michael Kaczynski, and Karen Bray, our director of operations, and the several department heads who are here to contribute specific agenda item discussion content. First and foremost, we actually do have some good news to report, and for that I'm going to ask Patty Kao to continue a very special birthday celebration that many of you may have seen somewhere on social media over the weekend. Patty.
Hi. We've had a Millis resident. Her name is Josephine Pelia. She turned 100 years young this Saturday. Josephine is sharp as a tack. She enjoys a spirited conversation when it comes to politics, and she's proud to be an American. She attributes her many years to eating as much as she wants and whatever she wants, no smoking, no drinking, no medication, and no exercise, and the biggest part, a daily dose of Flintstone vitamins. Happy birthday, Josephine.
Well, I think at this point we're all supposed to sing, but we want to make sure that we don't lose our audience. So I did see the great picture of Josephine. I think she goes by Jay. Is that correct? I think I saw that on a banner. So I don't know if anybody from her family is participating on today's call. Is anybody here from Josephine's family?
They will be watching us on TV, on cable TV.
Well, we're just thrilled. Obviously, Clean Living has served her very well. We're super glad that she's proud to be an American because one of our earliest agenda items today will be recognition of our veterans. But we all, I would say on behalf of the entire community of Millis, are pretty impressed by 100 years, and we're thrilled that we get to celebrate with her. And we hope she has a wonderful birthday month. Not to be confused with a birthday day. All of us women, we know how this works. So congratulations, Josephine, and many happy and healthy days to you ahead. Thank you, Patty, for bringing that to our attention. That's awesome news. In our upcoming announcements is a brief update as to the town's continued response to COVID-19 and our anticipation of the more formal reopening process, even though Millis has had a lot of businesses continuing to work. And I'm going to ask our Director of Emergency Management, Chief Barrett, as well as our Director of our Health Department, John McVeigh, to pick up the conversation with any new news that we need to know.
I didn't know, Chief, do you want to chime in first? Do you want me to go?
No, go ahead, John. If you want to start off, I'll join in after.
Okay, so just as an update, locally from staff, currently the town of Millis cumulative positives are 39. I'm here. She may have some more recent information. Looking at some data from the state, it could be cumulative hospitalizations. The good news, it looks as though that the trend is going down. It plateaued about a week or so ago, and it's steadily going downwards. There's some spikes, but the trend is going down. So that bodes well for the 18th and hopefully opening. There's a lot of questions about the reopening, and I think that we'll have to wait till the state guidelines, but it's probably going to be a phased reopening with low-risk endeavors first, and then slowly but surely, maybe month after month, allowing more in-depth reopening based on numbers staying steady or declining. But currently, that's about the state of affairs. We have obviously the governor's orders on masks, so we encourage people also mandated that they wear masks if they can't social distance and when they're in a place of business. We Had some complaints, not many, patients going into places not wearing masks, but you definitely have to wear your mask in places that. That's all I.
And then I would just add on to what John was saying. We're definitely seeing the trend on the downward slope, which is great. Social distancing and wearing a mask is working. Our hospitals haven't reached their limits. Our ICU beds are open. Hospital beds are open. So the state's accomplished what their goal was, to limit the impact in the hospital, which is great. We would just continue to ask everybody to wear a mask when you're on public and when you're in businesses in Millis. And we look forward to the reopening process starting up soon. Thank you.
Are there any other questions by participants in the call as to anything on this important topic? Any from my colleagues? Hearing none, I want to thank everybody on the front lines who continue to keep us safe, and thank the community for bearing with the inconvenience in the interest of public safety, both your own personal safety as well as those you care about and those you don't know. Moving on to our first agenda item, which is 20-097. It hardly seems possible given the weather of late, but we are in fact approaching Memorial Day, and this year we will have a modified Memorial Day simply by virtue of the environment in which we are all living and navigating. And within our board, Peter Germain is in fact an Army veteran, and I believe Major John Moore, I believe he is on, and so we have the distinct honor of welcoming them both, and ultimately to invite Selectman Germain to read a proclamation on behalf of the town. And you gentlemen can take it from here. Peter, you have to unmute.
I apologize. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, and John, I'm sorry, Major Moore, you have to unmute as well.
Okay.
There you go. You gentlemen have the floor.
Would you? I was wondering if it might be better for our veterans agent to read the proclamation this year. Would that be okay with you, Madam Chair?
It's whatever you gentlemen would prefer.
Major Moore, as the captain, I salute you and take off.
You know what? I would love to read it. I actually got. I apologize, Pete. I thought you were gonna read it.
That's fine. I will read it right now. How's that?
You saved my day, Captain.
The proclamation is, and I've got to move it to a better screen because this is impossible. Whereas Memorial Day, originally called Decoration Day, is a day of remembrance for those who have died in service of the United States of America. Over 24 cities and towns claim to be the birthplace of Memorial Day. While Waterloo, New York was officially declared the birthplace of Memorial Day by President Lyndon Johnson in May 1966, it's difficult to prove conclusively the origins of the day. Excuse me. Whereas, regardless of the exact date or location of its origins, one thing is clear: Memorial Day was born out of the Civil War and a desire to honor our dead. It was officially proclaimed on 5 May 1868 by General John Logan, National Commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, in his General Order Number 11. In quotes, the 30th of May 1868 is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land, he proclaimed. The date of Decoration Day, as he called it, was chosen because it wasn't the anniversary of any particular battle. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Millis Select Board do hereby proclaim Monday, the 25th of May, 2020, as Memorial Day in the town of Millis, and urge all citizens of this community to join us in support of Memorial Day. Respectfully, the Select Board. So, John, do you have anything further that you would like to add to this?
Just really the plans of Memorial Day, because obviously, it goes with, we'll be observing it, but talking with other local VSOs throughout the state and just the mandates that are in place, across the state, state guidelines, Millis, we'll be doing a common sense approach to observing Memorial Day, and that's simply going to be a film speech myself. Got my hair cut so I can actually go back into my uniform for a little bit better optic, I guess, and talk about Memorial Day for about 3 or 4 minutes. But that's what most VSOs throughout the Commonwealth are also doing, having a film statement for the citizens. And we obviously made that decision just common sense, talking with Chief Sophia and talking to local veterans organizations, just giving them a heads up exactly what the town will do. I know some of the local veterans will have a small private ceremony at a cemetery that's not part of the town's observance, but their own. That's all I have on the veteran or the Memorial Day observance.
Well,
Madam
we're
Chair,
disappointed that we...
turn it back to you.
Yes, I was just going to say, Major Moore, and to all of our veterans, Mr. Germain, and all veterans on this call, and potentially viewing from home, past and present, and to their families as well. We are, as all Americans are, indebted to your bravery and your service and your selflessness. We are frustrated because Millis has always taken pride in the tradition of a very nice Memorial Day commemoration, which Major Moore just has to take my word for that. He has not had the pleasure of participating in our festivities in the past, but we will make it up to him for sure as soon as we have the opportunity to participate as we would want to, which is the ability to be in person and to be appropriately reverent and respectful in acknowledging the incredible sacrifices and service that you all make to our country. And so we will make sure to post information about Memorial Day affairs. And I'm sure your webpage already has a lot of this information, Major Moore, is that correct?
It will. It does not, but it will.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions? And I would certainly ask all of our community to make sure that you dress your home and maybe even your car for this important date, which is Monday, May 25th this year. But it would be very nice if Millis was teaming with American flags, even if we can't be together as one group with a parade and traditional events. At least we can show our patriotic spirit in thanking our veterans from our hearts, and there's no finer way to do that than show our American pride. And certainly I also want to acknowledge and thank the DPW and the Cemetery Committee for all that they are doing and will be doing to make sure that Prospect Hill Cemetery is in beautiful shape for the customary visits that people do make to the cemetery over this time. Are there any other questions or comments about Veterans Day?
Madam Chair,
Please.
I would like to make a motion
Yes, sir.
that the Select Board approve the proclamation read by our colleague, Mr. Germain.
I'll second that.
Second. Yep, second. It's moved and seconded, of course, to procedurally adopt this proclamation to honor our veterans of Millis. I will pull the board. Mr. McCaffrey,
Yes?
Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. And I apologize for that oversight. And again, thank the community of Millis for saluting our veterans. And I thank Mr. McCaffrey for reminding me of that procedural step. So thank you very much. Major Moore, thank you very much, and please thank everybody within the community of veterans with whom I know you are in touch on a daily basis.
Yes, ma'am. Will do.
And I will also say that since we are comparing bookshelves, you have a very impressive one. It's part of the Zoom protocol now. There's even websites about backgrounds of Zoom meetings. So moving right along to an item of... great seriousness. And
I would just like to ask the veterans agent if, in fact, that is a bookshelf or just wallpaper made to look like a bookshelf.
Oh, that
Never
is
mind.
actually a bookshelf.
Excellent.
it's impressive,
There's
nonetheless.
long-line bookshelves we can buy, right?
Yeah, you can. You can get virtual backgrounds and put them in behind you. So
I haven't read them all. I will admit that.
it's very impressive, and I do see some baseballs on that shelf and a football helmet. So you can learn a lot about people from their office. So we're very happy to have you be here for our veterans community, Major Moore. And again, we will figure out a celebration in due time when we are allowed to do so. So thank you very much. I'm going to. Anybody else? Any other comments? I'm sorry. Not everyone. I'm going to move along now to agenda item 20098. This is a follow-up conversation on that the select board. There's somebody on that needs to just hit mute. Somebody may be moving papers or something. Okay. We began the not fun but responsible management discussion of looking into the future with respect to the fiscal 21 budget. We all know, we have heard, we have read, we have researched that obviously the pandemic has had a very devastating effect to revenue that will not be recaptured by Millis or frankly the other 350 municipalities across the Commonwealth. And as a result, the appropriate subject expert think tanks that study tax and municipal finance policy have consistently reported some ominous projections for shortfalls in both federal and state aid. And not dissimilar from Millis's approach with stormwater, where we knew that we needed to figure out a management program for handling unfunded mandates, be they state or federal, with respect to, in that case, the DEP. The select board entering into its phase of leadership with respect to the fiscal 20-year budget, 21 budget, made a decision in the majority last week to recommend to the town administrator, the director of finance, and their management team to plan to implement a fiscal 21 budget that would recognize and anticipate this funding shortfall by preparing a budget and adjusting structures and services and certainly labor as well to reflect a 5% decrease in aid that would be recognized from fiscal 20 to fiscal 21. We want to acknowledge that this is not a conversation that anybody takes lightly. We certainly didn't. We had a very vigorous conversation about this, and it is just the beginning of a conversation in terms of how we move forward. So this agenda item picks up where we left off and begins with an acknowledgement that the do-nothing option, which we opted not to do last week, does have an element of risk to it. And so we felt as a board that doing something was far more prudent than hoping for the best. We also want to acknowledge that we are told, and from all indications anybody can read this on the news, that we are not expecting to know what the state and parenthetically federal aid contributions will be at the local municipal levels anywhere in Massachusetts until sometime toward the end of the summer. So where fiscal year begins on July 1, we are doing this somewhat in the dark and using as the basis of this 5% decision marker the expert associations and think tanks who study this policy and are doing some projections from which legislators as well as municipal governments are all trying to make their own decisions in real time. So today, in anticipation of an open finance committee meeting, which is happening on Wednesday night, the select board has the opportunity to revisit any of the topics, and among them is that we received a memo from the town administrator who, although he was obviously here for our last meeting on Friday, wants us to potentially revisit the decision to implement a 5% contingency budget plan. So I'm going to ask the town administrator to speak to that right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your indulgence, I'll go through the memo I put together for the board, following up from your meeting last Friday. In light of the budget discussions that occurred on Friday, I feel compelled to convey to the board my continued concerns regarding the institution of substantial and harmful cuts to the town's FY21 budget without any firm knowledge of what actual reduction in revenue we're likely to have in FY21. In my over 25 years in municipal administration, I actually have never instituted this level of cuts without having more firm revenue numbers. Having said that, I fully appreciate the board's concerns, and I agree that it's vitally important to discuss strategies that may need to be put into place should this level of revenue reduction come to pass. Having said that, and based upon the current information available, I'm recommending that we base the FY21 budget on the original revenue numbers put forward. We would then closely monitor all of our revenues over the first couple of months of the fiscal year and plan to make any adjustments that may be necessary at the fall town meeting. A huge benefit to this approach would be that it would provide additional time for careful and measured planning of possible service adjustments if they are needed in the fall. I have reached out with colleagues in Norfolk County and confirmed that many of their communities are taking a similar approach. I'm also concerned that we may find it extremely difficult to reach a consensus budget in time for the June 29th annual town meeting with the Finance Committee and the School Committee based on an estimated 5% revenue reduction. I do firmly believe at this time this is the best path forward, and I'd be happy to discuss any details of that or details within the budget itself as you've received it. I understand the board did take a vote on Friday, and certainly it's up to the board whether you want to further look at this or move forward. But I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of my concerns at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to invite my colleagues to weigh in on the town administrator's concerns, and then I'm going to ask our colleagues from the school committee and FinCom who are participating in this meeting to do so as well. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. I think that we are all finding it difficult because we don't know what's going to happen, that's for sure. And I think we need to have a strategy in place that enables us to be nimble, if you will, if in fact we begin to see revenue shortfalls or revenue reductions due to state aid, because obviously the aid number is not the only number that we need to be concerned about. As I understand it from conversations with the finance department, at this point in time, the collections and whatnot are holding up pretty well. We're not seeing any problem in the short run. We did have a little bit of short run shortfall, if you will, because we moved the tax deadline from May 1 to June 1. But most of the escrow companies paid on time, so it looks like we're in reasonably good shape from that perspective anyway. And I do think we need to make a decision and we need to make a proposal that we can all live with. But honestly, I think we all understand that whatever road we decide to, or whatever direction we decide to go in now, it's pretty clear, one way or another, we're going to be meeting in the fall again with a new perspective, and if needed, even before then. Because some of that will depend on what we see in the form of tax collections, local receipts, including meals tax and whatnot, as well as the state aid. So it's an important decision to make. I think there's value to everyone in examining where exactly we would propose to reduce our budget. The devil's in the details, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And we have to understand what the service cutbacks would actually be if we were to move forward with the decision that we made with respect to reduced revenue from state aid and local resources. So I'm sorry, local receipts. So I think the exercise of going through the details of what the budget would look like if we impose what amounts to almost a $500,000 reduction in revenue expectation, because that will help us decide whether we're going too fast or too slowly. I think we made an important decision to move forward and take a look at contingencies. So I guess I'm not inclined to just accept the recommendation of the town administrator that we move forward with the original proposal. I'd like to go through, and we've seen some detail, I'd like to go through what the expectation would be, what the proposed cuts might be. We did have conversation about short-term use of stabilization, which is another thing for conversation. And believe me, I respect the town administrator's position here. It's not easy for a town administrator to come back to a board and say you're wrong, but that's what we're paying him to do. He didn't say we were wrong, but he said we ought to reconsider, and I very much appreciate his willingness to do that, as well as the willingness on the part of the finance director, town administrator, and the other departments of looking what cuts might look like if we in fact were to move forward and propose a budget that will that would have some reduction in revenue expectation. Keeping in mind that all these budgets are actually always developed on a projection. We don't know until the aid is actually finalized. We don't know on the real estate taxes or local receipts until we actually collect them. So there's always a bit of issue there. And the Department of Revenue places pretty significant guidelines or limitations, if you will, on how aggressive we can be with our estimates. So the estimates have in themselves some built-in conservatism. But again, we're at a pretty extraordinary time. And I believe, as a member of this board, I would like to see the conversation on our side, on all sides, as to what it would look like if, in fact, we actually implemented the budget cuts that we had asked the town administrator to look at. And that estimate has been prepared, so I think it's incumbent upon us to go through it and try to determine what it actually means as opposed to what the top line number is.
Thank you, Mr. McCaffrey. Mr. Germain, do you have anything to add?
Yes. First of all, I want to say this is what I expect from a town administrator. It's a very tough decision to go counter to the board's vote. But he has at least expressed his concern and backed it up with having gone to other towns to try to understand what people in similar position to him have done in the other towns. That having been said, I also refer back to conversations I had with the town administrator. And as my colleague, Mr. McCaffrey, just pointed out, the whole thought of a 5% cut based on revenues from the state is a very difficult choice, even for us to make at this point. The concern I have, and I'm going to reiterate a little of what was said previously, is in talking with our state representatives, it is unlikely we are going to see anything near the level of funding from the state that we've had in the past. They have no idea what it's going to be at this time, but they were pretty clear that, to use one of their words, it could be pretty severe. And the word they used was severe. So, yes, everything we do at this stage is an estimate, and it's no different than what we do every year when we're projecting the budget, whether I was in the FinCom for many years doing this or now sitting here. The concern I have, and this is my concern, so I don't mean to tag either of my other colleagues with it, is that if we don't do something at this stage, and we spend at a level where we anticipate that we are going to get full funding that we've had in the past, and we don't get it, we will be in a very serious situation, which is, I think, at least from my perspective, what I was trying to avoid with this. The town manager, town administrator has made it very clear that he is reviewing in detail the budget as proposed to see what, if anything, can be further refined out of it to limit the escalating costs that we're dealing with. And let's recognize what's been discussed previously. A lot of the costs at this point that we're looking at have to do with salary increases, healthcare costs, and other items that we really have no choice but to deal with. That's thunder, I guess I'm hearing. I, for one, am more than willing to look at what he may come back with, and I hope to see it from other departments like the schools also. This is not a decision that was taken lightly. We do understand there are horrible implications. The concern is, are they less horrible taking some of these decisions now than potentially procrastinating and hoping things get better, and if they don't, what do we do 3-4 months from now? So my view at the moment is I do want to review what the town administrator is coming back with. He is giving us even more detail and promises yet more within the next few days to a week. I'm willing to look at all of that, obviously, and I want to hear what the schools have to say. They are a major part of this discussion. And so I don't want anyone to think I haven't considered that, or none of us have considered it. We all have considered it. But we need to hear from them and understand what the implications are. So I won't take up any more of your time.
I just want to ask, thank you very much, Mr. Germain. I want to ask if there's a couple of people I think I recognize from the either Finance Committee and or the School Committee, and I'm wondering if any one of you could introduce yourselves and kind of chime in at this moment before I go back to the Town Administrator.
Madam Chair, this is Pete Berube. If you have a minute.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hold on, I'll put my video on. Good afternoon. I participated in Friday's discussion and appreciate the opportunity to at least provide my opinion, and I know we'll be discussing this on Wednesday, as you had stated. And I'll just really reiterate my position, or at least what I'll be posing questions to Finance Director and the Town Administrator on Wednesday. But just to be clear, I'm an advocate for reductions now versus wholesale cuts. And I think it matters, words matter, and my focus is on reductions and not necessarily wholesale cuts to departments or positions. I believe the town should look to freeze the budget increases that are planned in the do-nothing or the status quo, which in most cases reflect 4% increases, through adoption or implementation of the FY20 budget. And I don't know the mechanics of doing that. That's not my, certainly not my expertise, but I know that we as a town possess the expertise on how to do that. I think that's a more responsible approach. I do think that, as Mr. Kaczynski said, or along the lines of what he said, that the measures, if you put measures in now, like freezing potential pay increases that would go into effect in July, if you freeze those now, it makes it easier to implement changes if forced to do so over the full 12 months of the fiscal year versus waiting until fall town meeting, in which case you're only giving yourself 6 to 8 months to take all of those cuts for the FY21 budget, is my understanding. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
We're very glad you're participating. I do believe, is Mark Conroy here?
Yes, I am.
Could you chime in? Would you be willing to accept the invitation to do so?
Sure. Let me I'll put my video on just to be honest. So, having watched this and seen this over the last few months, I agree that taking the approach of just budgeting basically what we have now as estimates, which is the governor's budget, is
unrealistic. I think we can all acknowledge that the revenue coming in state aid is not going to be what is in the governor's budget. I think it's unfortunate that the legislature is so far been unable to even give us estimates. Normally at this point in the process, we have at least 2, if not 3 data points to use. And right now, all we have coming from Beacon Hill is one completely outdated amount of information, which makes our lives significantly harder. It would be helpful if we even had a date from them as to when we should get some real numbers that would allow us to maybe understand that we need to get through the first couple of months, maybe July, August, then we get numbers from the state. So I think we do need to recognize some revenue shortfall, but what I'm hesitant to do is to not include immediately conversation and quantifying how much stabilization fund we as a town will be willing to use. We've historically used, 100,000, 200,000 on any given year for reasons that are not anywhere near a rainy day situation that we have like this. So I think before we quantify and start disseminating and publicly sharing the number of heads in specific places where reductions are going to be, we collectively should come up with a value of how much stabilization are we also willing to put in to mitigate some of these reductions. And until we do that, I think it's tough to be out there talking about cut lists and what exactly these are going to mean. So for me personally, and I honestly just joined us to this, and so I'm not speaking on the school committee. This is just my personal opinion. I think the other thing that, having sat at the time on the finance committee in 2008, when the federal government came in and did give us 3 years worth of stimulus money that then went away. But after the third year, all other revenue sources had come back to a point where we never had to, be at the end of the tunnel, as we were saying during the time, is we were spending money that may not exist in 3 years. Well, it didn't come to fruition. I personally have a difficult time thinking that if state aid doesn't materialize and we have drastic cuts to the 2% or more, that there won't be some necessary investment from the federal government to stimulate municipal, because it's not just going to be Millis and it's not just going to be Massachusetts. So I would like to see us as a town manage through this as much as possible, by making the least amount of reductions possible until we have actual hard and fast numbers. And, again, I circle back to in the real short term, I think it needs to come from, we need to quantify how much we think is reasonable to use in stabilization. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge and acknowledge the fact that for many people this is a standard work day, and to have the great fortune of people who, again, aren't representing an official board position but are willing to participate from the school committee and the finance committee in a singular voice, I think is really collaborative and an indicator of a strong partnership to unfold. I'm going to ask the town administrator to specify. There's a lot of department heads on here, and I want to go back and say that from the original budget presentations of department directors back on February 8th, that were made in a totally different financial context up to the present, that all of the budget documents, the backup documents, up to and including last Friday, are available on the town website. And what that means is that for some, there was, obviously a great degree of alarm because there isn't anybody on this call, anybody on any of these boards that thinks, it would be at all pleasant to cut services to the town. There isn't anybody that woke up this morning and said, I can't wait to do that. But having said that, we all recognize the reality. And what we're trying to do, I believe the select board tried to do last Friday, was to try and take a step in the direction of an unavoidable reality facing us down the road. But I wanted to ask if the town administrator and the director of finance could briefly enumerate two things. One is to highlight the potential ideas that you have floated as would represent a distinction in the mind of the resident between fiscal 21 with the 5% cuts applied against what they knew to exist as services in fiscal year 20. That would be the first thing I would ask. And then the second thing is that we invited the community as a whole to submit any number of ideas without any restriction that may in fact be opportunities for savings, whether it's of positions and or to improve and streamline functions as would help to save positions or create some more efficiency. So I think the town administrator and the director of finance are available to comment on both. The first being the contrast between fiscal 21 with the 5% action that we as a board directed them to do last week, and then also these other ideas that they could see taking a look at on the basis of public input.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So based on the board's request to put together two budget scenarios based on a 5% reduction of estimated revenues from the state and from local receipts, and then a 10% reduction in estimated revenues from state aid and local receipts. On the municipal side, it comes out that reduction is $159,815. And on the school side, that would be $296,798. A scenario we put forward, but certainly still open for discussion and tweaking if the board were to move ahead with a 5% reduction in revenue model, would be a 10% reduction in the salary and wages of all employees that work at the Veterans Memorial Building, excepting the DPW and the Board of Health. The DPW, as you know, is funded largely from Water and Sewer Enterprise, and the Board of Health is in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. This 10% reduction would necessitate the closing of the VMB on Fridays to account for the loss of 4 hours of staff time. And then on top of that would be a 5% reduction in the overall library budget, which based on the director's narrative could result in a 15% reduction in public operating hours of the library and could place the certification of the library in jeopardy. And if I may, Madam Chair, I know that the question came up about a salary or wage freeze. I just wanted to point out to the board that over 95% of the personnel in the municipal government are either contracted or unionized, and any freeze would require negotiations with all those unions. And the question of whether something could be resolved before town meeting on any approach like that is certainly in question. So again, these adjustments are just a scenario that was put out for the board, but based on the board's ultimate decision on where you want to go with a formulated budget proposal, it's still open to adjustments and based on some further discussions with departments and ways that we could possibly trim in bits and pieces to try to reduce that reduction in hours. Although our expenses have already been cut severely, I don't see a large area where further expenses can be cut. But we would certainly take a look at that in more detail to see if additional expenses could be cut in places to allow for a lesser cut in hours at the VMB and the library.
Does anybody have any specific questions to this before I ask the town administrator to also address some of the ideas that came in from the community that I scribed and including some that even came in today.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Sure.
I know
Yep.
directly related to the 5% cut, but we do have a list of the original adjustments from the requested budgets of the departments to actually get us to the original budget numbers based on the original governor's revenue estimate. It would just take me about 1 to 2 minutes to go through that. I think it's worthwhile just to update the public on those adjustments. And these are adjustments or recommendations that have already been made based on the governor's numbers. So as the board is aware, the finance director and I, in consultation with the department heads, cut approximately $500,000 in budget requests on the municipal side of the ledger. And some of the items, just to highlight some of the bigger ones, is I know we were attempting to get a part-time IT person at $50,000. That's been eliminated with $20,000 put into a consulting services line to get assistance with that for fiscal year 21. There's currently a vacancy in one of our facility maintenance positions. I'm recommending that position be eliminated. We bring on a private cleaning company to do that work for additional savings to the town. The proposed elimination of the school crossing guards for a savings of $52,800, and putting in their place crosswalk signage and lights at a one-time cost of $40,000. In a discussion with the fire chief, the chief has decided to postpone the submission of an application for the federal grant until next year for 4 additional firefighters, paramedics. And again, the chief has been working on that some time, but in light of the situation, and after our discussion, has opted to hold off on that. And some small adjustments to the library, as well as over $80,000 in reductions to the highway expense lines from what was proposed. So there have been a number of adjustments just based on trying to meet the governor's number. But I'd be happy to talk about some of the budget ideas that I have received in regards to, and there's probably, I received over 40 of them, but I can, if you'd like, I can talk about maybe 7 or 8 of them that I feel that are items that, certainly can be worked on over the next 1 to 2 years for possible improvement of town services overall.
Please.
So the first one is already being contemplated, and that is the elimination of the crossing guards and the installation of permanent crosswalk signs and lights. Again, I think in discussions we've had, it's been difficult to recruit crossing guards, and we believe, and I think after extensive discussions with the chief and some conversations with the superintendent, we think this is something that makes sense for the community. Another idea put forward was to merge the municipal IT with the IT at the schools. We've had some discussion regarding this, and it's something that certainly can be discussed again in a little more vigor to look at moving forward with that, with the possibility of creating some efficiencies and perhaps even saving some funds. There was a proposal to replace some of our outside engineering firms with a town engineer and student interns for some of our DPW and architectural needs. That's certainly something that deserves to have a look at, and part of the DPW report actually recommended. There was a proposal to post all the costs of unfunded DEP and EPA mandates so that they're more visible to the taxpayers. This wouldn't necessarily save any money for the community, but it certainly would provide some better understanding for the citizens of the town as to why the town needs to expend funds in certain areas that members of the public may question. Another proposal was to continue to improve business onboarding with TIFs and other incentives to support local employment and use of local contractors and vendors. I think this is something that should be supported by the administration and the select board. and we can certainly have discussions with our economic development director in regards to this, and consult the Economic Development Commission about strategies that we can employ that. So it's something that I think is an idea that could have some legs. Another thought: shared services, neighboring towns. Again, this is something that the town has been working on for some time. We do have a number of shared services with other towns, but we've tried in other areas as well. Had some successes and some failures, but it's an area where I think there's still room for opportunities. And then a few more. A look at the fields, looking at the operation of all the playing fields in the community, and how we can coordinate those fields through better communication and through better administration of the programs and so forth between the school and other in recreation and other municipal departments, and maintenance issues with the DPW, that we may be able to work on some work together on creating a better system of maintaining and administering the fields. Let's see. I think those are the main ones. I didn't know if there were any others that you wanted to bring up, Madam Chair, but I think those are the ones that I wanted to make a point to bring up.
I received one today, and that was to look at revenue opportunities for town space. And this ranges from there were 3 different ones. The one that came in today was to look at fees for extended day, previously Millis Community Media, and possibly to have like a coffee shop and leased space in the library, all with revenue opportunities to offset some contracting of budget. I think the point here is to say 2 things to the town and to the department heads. Is number one, that the select board took a proactive and deliberate effort in trying to engage the town and the citizenry, and to invite their input and opinions, and that input could have come from employees. It could have come from any number of residents. So this list is compiled from a variety of people. Some people, contributing more than others. So I think the one thing is to say that nothing we're doing here in a budget management perspective for fiscal year 21 is behind a curtain. It's in fact very deliberately out in the open. And number 2, that we are really trying to practice what the Mass Municipal Association has been preaching to us, which is reinventing government and taking a hard look even at practices that we consider kind of sacrosanct and tradition are the only way that any municipal government is going to be able to weather this storm. So I'm going to open it up to anybody who may in fact have a question for the town administrator with respect to this early phase of budget conversations, keeping in mind that the select board will be participating along with any number of people from this call in Wednesday night's meeting with the Finance Committee. We're all working toward the same goal, which is to be ready for the worst and to be positioned for that. So does anybody have any other comments to add to this piece of the agenda? And if so, you can just chime in. I'm looking here for chat requests, but I don't see any. I'm also just mindful, I don't know what it's doing outside of your window, but it's Typhoon Mary here, so I want to make sure that we don't lose our Wi-Fi or power or anything like that. Keep the meeting moving forward. Does anybody else have any other comments?
Chair?
Yes.
I just want to circle back and from what's coming out of the conversation as well is things we've talked about, but things I think that this board should be ready, willing, and able to continue the dialogue. It is certainly when and if and how to use stabilization in formulating our plans going forward. I think that's important. I think the comment that was made by an earlier participant about another alternative available to us under the statutory provisions for, local relief, if you will, which is to actually adopt a temporary budget moving into FY21, which we could do as a board, and then reconvene the conversation when the maybe more information is available from the state. We get a better picture. So there is, of course, the course of finalizing our budget recommendation after a lot of work, which we've been doing for quite a while, and we're going to continue to do. Present it to town meeting, and then look at it again in the fall. So there's a number of opportunities that we should not, I don't think any of us would like to dismiss, and we should consider them all in parallel. But we can't do everything. We have to keep focused on what we think is going to provide us with what we're looking at. Certainly right now is a short to intermediate term challenge, which hopefully will always be short or intermediate term and not develop into something much more draconian a year from now. So I want to echo your comments about thanking the community for participating. There's a number of good ideas and strategies that we all ought to work together to consider, because it's important for us to chart our course over the next number of months in a way that we all hope will be sustainable and not just a temporary stopgap.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I agree in principle with many of the things that have been stated. My concern right now is what I mentioned earlier. If I add up just what salaries and health care, I think it's important that everyone in the audience understand, at least my numbers tend to show on the order of $700,000 increase to the town. That includes what I understand from the schools, where at least in one of the papers I have, and I may be reading this incorrectly, and I apologize if I am, but on the order of $490,000. And this is before we worry about adding anything to the budget that's being requested by any department anywhere. I think I've got that right, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we were around 160,000, was it, for Veterans Memorial, or was it more, Mr. Kaczynski? Do you remember?
I think it was 160,000 for the reduction of hours at Veterans Memorial Building, as well as a 5% cut library.
If you didn't cut, if we just take the excuse me for a moment. If you just take the amounts that are going to increase this year for salary through contracts, union negotiation, and so forth, and health care, I don't remember what that adds to the budget, if it was another couple 100,000, 200, 300,000. I just don't remember off the top of my head. We had it, and I do apologize. I should have it much more closely at hand. My point being that even staying level funded is at a big expense for the town. And that's something we all need to understand. I'm not against, in concept, if we need to dip into stabilization, but I certainly want to consider that as a last resort. It's not something that I would plan on doing. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, sir? Okay. So to that end, my concern is that even if we were to agree at some point that we wanted to go down the road for a couple of months, making a preliminary budget that may not meet our concerns for the cuts, the longer we go down that road, as Mr. Berube pointed out, the shorter the time is to recover based on whatever we might not get. I mean, it would be nice to think we will get the funding from the feds. Right now, I think there may be a different attitude in Washington, and that's what concerns me greatly at this stage. So those are the things that I'm looking at. and saying, we can certainly move forward with your recommendation, but we need to further understand what that means on a month-by-month basis from my perspective in the event things don't come to fruition the way we want. And although it looks great to have, 1.6 million in our stabilization fund, that won't last very long if we begin to have major recovery issues. Thank you.
Mr. McCaffrey, you're unmuted. Did you want to add something?
No, it's the lightning that muted me. So I unmuted and...
Yeah, we're all kind of watching the weather. So I just want to add a comment. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that that we're all trying to be really responsible. In that vein, I would be disinclined to change the board's recommendation for building a budget on the basis of the 5% reduction in aid. I know that we've already lost revenue that we will never recapture. So that's not coming from anywhere. It's locally generated, locally based, and we've already lost it. And I would rather to be in a better position of recovering from not something so catastrophic because we've already taken some steps. We've frozen spending, and we've worked together as one big community to make these tough decisions. So I would feel comfortable. I would feel most comfortable doing that. And I also would like to not, as a precedent, be dipping into stabilization for this. I think that this is a function of management. And to me, stabilization has a different purpose than to borrow for payroll. So I would not feel comfortable with that. But that's my singular position. I don't know if the board wants to take up a vote to reverse or change their budget direction to the town administrator on the basis of his of his memo. But I'm going to put that forth to my colleagues. Anyone?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify, I was not attempting to force a vote of the board today. It's up to the board to determine if you want to have a vote or decide whether to make any change. But in one form or fashion, either through today's meeting or a meeting within the next week and a half, I certainly would request just further clarification and the direction we're going to be going in, so I can go back and work on finalizing any budgets or making any adjustments to the budgets that need to be adjusted before they go to the Finance Committee, which I know is anxiously anticipating a proposed budget. I know they're meeting this Wednesday, and I believe they're meeting most Wednesdays after that until the town meeting. But I see their calendar. Their final recommendations are due June 10th. But obviously they like a little leeway and a little time before they make their final recommendations. So I would think that they would truly want to get, the board's, final budget, before the end of this month would be my, and I would defer to any members of the Finance Committee on the meeting if they have any other thoughts on it. But I just want to, make sure we have a firm decision within the next week and a half, so that I can work on finalizing that and forwarding that to the Finance Committee.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I guess in terms of, the menu of choice, the board has been presented with several scenarios. And one of the scenarios was the original one, which as the town administrator recognized, was not at the level of funding that was requested in departments. So we went from one iteration to a second one, which is a somewhat reduced recommendation based upon the revenue numbers. We also have been presented with a budget proposal that would result from a reduction in expected revenue from the state and from local receipts. And that budget recommendation has specifics in it. The implications of such a change are not academic, but in fact are proposed in a way that we'd be able to understand. That belies the fact that there still could be conversation among, the policy-making groups, the finance committee, the school committee, and the board as to what direction to go in. But at this stage of the game, I would like to see us deliberate specifically about the recommendations that have been made based upon our vote to ask for a budget that reflected this 5% reduction. Mm-hmm. Only when you know that do you know whether or not you have any inclination whatsoever of utilizing any of stabilization at this point, because you see where the pain is. I am not in favor of revisiting I'll call it it's not even a recommendation, our direction to the town administrator to present this option to us with the revenue reduction included in it. Now, I don't know what additional work is required, because there are numbers there. There are specific items by specific line. And not that we would do it this evening, but at some point, I think we just need to go through it. I mean, people understand what it is and can debate it as to whether or not that's where they'd like to see. So, I think that we can certainly visit with the finance committee Wednesday, because we have posted the meeting, and just to reflect directly to them what our scenarios are that we are pursuing. That seems to make sense to me, anyway.
Yeah, I'm in agreement to take that approach, and that really would put back the town administrator and the director of finance to enumerate the specific aspects of this of the budget that they put forward, consistent with the select board's recommendation to make the most harm-free, I guess, cuts. One question I have for the town administrator is, you mentioned an $80,000 line item cut to expenses for the DPW. When I ask people what's of concern to them, what I consistently hear is roads, specifically roads, as being important. So I'm wondering if you could just tell the citizens what that $80,000 cut entails.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it was actually an $80,000 cut to the proposed or requested budget. And I believe $50,000 of that was for paving, which was a new expense, but it was something that's been talked about for some time. So again, the cuts or the adjustments, I should say, to the budget request for road maintenance supplies was the major one. There were, I believe, several other smaller items, but the vast majority of that was to the paving.
And did we save money on snow and ice removal that would in any way offset this? Usually we go back to town meeting and have that budget supplemented by a warrant article, because we usually run short.
I'd have to defer to I don't know if the finance director has the remaining funds left in that account. I don't know the exact remaining amount. It's not as much as you'd think. We did have a number of events. They weren't major snowstorms, so we had a number of major icing and other types of events. But I can't give you the exact number of where we are on that at the moment.
Madam Chair, I can give you that number.
Okay.
Looking in the budget, anyone? The overtime budget was exceeded, and the snow and ice contractors and chemicals, hang on, we got that. We're up to street lighting.
So snow and ice is in deficit of $3,302.69, which will be offset from the snow and ice removal. There is a balance of $18,286.91. So the way that this account was set up, it was taken out of the general line item of the DPW. It would take an act of a vote from the select board to use those funds to remain in the DPW budget. If not, they would have to go back into the general fund.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I think that, just for purposes of context here, we have a snow and ice budget that's pretty much on target.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nothing short of miraculous. We chronically under budgeted, and say to ourselves we shouldn't keep doing this, and we do it anyway. So this year we won't have a shortfall to make up in the fall out of free cash. So unless we have a snowstorm in the next weeks, which who knows? So
It'll be a first in all the years I've been involved with it.
yeah, I know it's pretty good news actually.
I do have a comment, and that is, I would like to at least wait on and defer any final decisions until after our discussions with the FinCom. I respect what the members of the FinCom have to say, and I think at that time, if I'm not mistaken, we will also get information from the schools. I seem to recall that they said that they had that. I think that would all be very useful to factor in and see if there's, for any reason, we want to revisit any portion of the budgetary processes we've gone through it at this point. I'm not suggesting that we may take any action tonight. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is I think it's worth listening, participating, hearing what they have to say as a group. And then I am most anxious to hear also what the schools have to say, because we need to understand the impact to them. And I don't say that lightly. I very much feel for what that could be. But then if it makes sense to revisit, we ought to be in position to do so. And that's basically where I feel.
I'd like to ask the town administrator, one of the things I'm really mindful of is that it's really easy for any board or committee to send a team back to the drawing board. In this case, the finance bunker inside of Veterans Memorial Building with a request that takes 1 minute to express, and what it really represents is days and days of work. So what I want to do is that if we as a board decide that we're going to participate in the finance committee on the 13th and then have one kind of post-finance committee budget follow-up so that we gel together our final ideas on the basis of that conversation this Wednesday. What I don't want to do is turn around and say, let's have another meeting on Monday the 18th. I simply think it's too quick for the people crunching the numbers. I also think it's not there's not enough time for the various department heads who've all written impassioned letters making the case for the impacts of any reductions or compressions to their departments, that now where they have a sense maybe of philosophy, maybe they could kind of go back to their offices and look at how is it that we might work together differently. For example, how might the rec department and the Council on Aging perhaps blend some of their programming? How might IT become one ecosystem? And I'm wondering if we allowed some time for those conversations to happen, perhaps we will still emerge with the budget targets that we've asked of the town administrator and the finance director to produce, but potentially with new ways in which to achieve the same end. And therefore, I would be somewhat reluctant to ask the select board to meet 2 days after the finance committee, effectively, if you take Friday out, but rather to give some time and perhaps look at the Tuesday after Memorial Day as a time to get together, if that seemed like a reasonable schedule to discuss just this budget. and the select board's final recommendation thereof. I'm wondering what my colleagues think about that plan. Nobody's saying anything.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would urge us to meet again on next Monday. We have to keep this ball rolling. I believe that there's a lot of work that's been done. That doesn't mean we're going to meet Monday to finalize our recommendations, but to keep, giving general direction and then not reacting to specific responses, I don't think moves us forward. I would urge us to meet on Monday.
All right.
Also to schedule the meeting for the following Tuesday. I mean, this is crunch time right now.
Having lived through this for over 10 years, I happen to concur. I think we have to be prepared to go through this crunch period with as much detail and information as possible and make the decisions. And there has to be a dialogue, and it has to be open to everyone who's participating in this, and particularly to the key departments of the town. We have to be cognizant of the concerns that it means to them, and they need to be cognizant of what our concerns are too.
I'd like to ask the town administrator if he feels that it's reasonable to come back with maybe, version 2, the information that you put together against the construct that we, as a board, required from our vote last week, with any potential alternatives to that with the same bottom line target.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, we could have an opportunity to speak with the department heads again that would be impacted and look up other options or scenarios to make adjustments without as much of a reduction in hours. I would assume that whether it's the 18th, 19th, 21st, as long as it's a day next week, we could work with that. I'd say whatever day works best for the board, we'll make it work. I think we can at least go through the budgets in finer detail and be able to come back with what we think is the best option in trying to meet an estimated 5% reduction in local aid and receipts.
Does the Director of Finance have a date preference, since her department will be probably disproportionately impacted by this work request?
Well, I can appreciate the fact that you have listed some things that would be strategic planning for maybe 3 to 5 years out. Some of the suggestions that you just came up with would not be realistic for this budget year. We would need to get some synergies between different departments that we wouldn't have available to us for the FY21 budget. Besides the library, the departments that were most impacted by the 5% reduction were my staff. So I have, talked to my staff, and at this point, the only way for us to have any reductions is to reduce on the 4 hours on Fridays. So, and the library reductions that we did, those were the reductions that the library director suggested. So I'm really not sure. I think it's just going to be an exercise in futility for us to continue to go back and try to figure something else out, which we've already worked on. If you have general direction that you think that, if you have other choices that you think we should make, I think this would be the time to let us know.
Well, speaking for myself, from people from whom I've heard a long-standing conversation about blending the IT function and achieving some economies of scale that would address the fact that a volunteer organization on the municipal side is not sustainable. And I'm hoping that we could get some improvement of the technical performance, but also perhaps some cost savings as a result of doing that. I've been asked about whether or not non-town departments could in fact be revenue generators. Should we in fact be charging for tenancy by Millis Community Media and Extended Day. That has precedent in the past. So again, that's not a cut, that's a revenue gain. That could in fact offset a cut. So I think for my own purposes, we do have a list of ideas. I hear that not everything is achievable at once, but I think we would be looking to you to identify what the cost benefit and the feasibility would be, for example, of reducing consultant fees on the engineering side with the offset decision of potentially hiring a town engineer, which would provide some other gains and potentially save us some money. So I think for me, I would be looking at when you think you could do that type of analysis.
Right. So, and again, all of those are great strategic ideas for us to think of for future years, but we are too close to the budget cycle now for us to have any real impact. There's a lot of buy-in that has to happen on those ideas. The IT sharing with the school, we would have to make sure it works for them and works for us. You can't just put that in place and have it happen overnight. There's a lot of planning that has to go along with that. The same thing for as far as generating revenue from rentals for the schools. That's something they would have to look into and say, is this feasible for us or not feasible for us? But that revenue would, I would believe, stay at the school if it's a school building. So there are different things, and I can appreciate your work and effort on trying to do some of these things. But I personally think that there's strategic issues that we should, as a group, come together, maybe the tri-board, and decide this is where we want to be in 5 years, this is where we want to be in 10 years, and how's our roadmap, what's our plan to get there. But I don't think we can get there between now and July.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yep.
I would concur with that. I think the only item on here that we could have a measurable impact, immediate impact on the FY21 budget is the one involving the crossing guards. The other ones are certainly thoughts and ideas that deserve review and deserve discussion with the parties, but I don't think any of them are developed enough to be able to have any immediate impact on the FY21 budget process. That's my take on it.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. Could I just say one thing? Just a comment to just a comment on something Mr. Germain said about Wednesday night. That the school will not be in a position to be presenting potential reductions or impacts of 5% on Wednesday night at the Finance Committee meeting. I just wanted to make sure that that was not an expectation, because those reductions and impact of your vote on Friday were just communicated on Friday, and the school committee will need to review any of those prior to determining and having them publicly addressed. Obviously, as based on the formula and how the revenue is, the revenue, the school will manage its bottom line number as it always does. So kind of in the short term, I just want to make sure that that's not something that is going to hold up a process because of determining how much revenue we should be estimating and other type of mitigation pieces we should be discussing. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Conroy. Well, this kind of reinforces my own feeling that I don't want to have a meeting on Monday if we don't have all the information to bring into that meeting. I think it would probably be more realistic to have a meeting later on in next week with the benefit of, I guess, Mr. Conroy, maybe you could indicate when we would have some sense of the school committee's approach to the overall financial direction of reducing by 5%.
I mean, the short answer is our approach will be we'll make reductions based on however much money we have available to us. based on the 65-35 split. We should have, our next formal meeting is going to be next Wednesday. But again, you will schedule your own, but I don't think us identifying the specifics necessarily holds you up from other things.
All right, so why don't we, Mr. Kaczynski, if you and your team want to use next Monday night to enumerate specifics with any modifications there too against the original goal that we set last week, we could do a meeting next Monday afternoon or evening as people want, depending on what my colleagues are available to do.
Very well.
We can set a time now based on everybody's preferences, trying not to run into people's dinner, and respect the fact at the same time this is a work day.
I have a meeting from 4 to 5 already scheduled on Monday. I could get out of it, but I would kind of hate to do so.
Well, if you want to do...
Madam Chair,
Yep.
Kathy McGinnis has a raised hand on our screen.
Oh, sorry, I did not see that. Please speak.
I was only raising it a little bit, Madam Chair, wondering if I should comment now or wait until Wednesday. Kathy McGinnis, newest member of Finance Committee, and what a time to begin. I understand, Mr. Jermaine, what you went through all these years now, but I have to say that what I'm hearing tonight and around town is there doesn't seem to be any immediacy to this problem. I have nothing to do with the schools, their own agenda, and they should be, and they are, but they should be, there's no principal dealing with children or superintendent dealing with issues. When you hear something as a corporation on a Friday, hey, we want a 5% cut, usually by over the weekend, you click in a couple of numbers. You're not meeting face to face. It's not, 5%, as a finance committee member, I don't care from the school where the 5% comes from, like Mark Farnroy said. It's just, you tell people 5% and you come back with it, and we have no say in what they decide, Madam Chair. And another thing, when you first got on the Board of Selectmen, one of your main issues was combining the IT for the school and the municipal. That's all I heard from you, Loring. There was an issue in the town hall, and one day, half a dozen school IT employees showed up, and we're dealing with volunteers. I regret to say that I would have expected some dialogue by now on that. I understand that there's a crunch in time now, but I'm just wondering about all these things that were thought about, Loring, that are still being thought about. And when I hear what the finance director has to say, that if we're saying, well, by July 1st, we won't get it done. Well, you know what? Get it done. Whenever I have an issue with my budget, and I'm not trying to bloviate, I hit the amount of money I have, and then I minus 5% on my little calculator, and that's what I come up with. So you just come up with it. Everybody's going to cry that they don't want their budgets cut, but you know what? It has to be cut. There's just no other way. We can't do IOUs. A suggestion would be to tell the unions that July 1st, I missed your first 40 minutes, by the way. Sorry, cleaning the cellar. I would have just said, sorry, we're not getting your raises, cost of living. And maybe you'll get a retro, and, some towns don't give retros. But I really wanted Wednesday to be able to, we've met off Wednesdays also on other days. Just getting on the computer, while the supper's cooking or something, and brainstorming. And I'm just wondering when the brainstorming is going to become votes. Because the longer that the selectmen or the school committee wait the harder it is, and with all respect to Mr. Kaczynski and the finance director, to do what you tell them to do. So I didn't have any questions or anything. I just want to hope that everybody that's hearing tonight and that are on the critical boards in town, and even like the Council on Aging and the library and everything, just accept the fact that, you're going to have to cut for a little while, and don't take it personally. And, to cut, and for the select board to be thinking about cutting the paving when, tell me, Mr. McCaffrey, if you can go into Roach Brothers, well, you can now because there's nobody in there, but without people saying, my roads, my roads, my roads. Don't cut that. Anyway, thank you very much for giving me the time to talk about this issue, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Address that briefly. I would say we actually have, as the board knows, we have presented at least one scenario of a 5%.
Get off their asses.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I'm still not on mute. Talking to my husband. Hi.
Madam Chair?
Hi, Steve. How are you doing?
You got so offensive.
We can still hear you.
How do I hit on mute?
I don't know.
I would have whispered that to you at a selectmen's meeting, Jim. You know that. Get this?
Trying.
Madam Chair, if I may, just to touch upon a couple issues, and I certainly appreciate the comments. As the board knows, we have put together at least one scenario involving a 5% reduction in certain anticipated revenues, and we'll be reviewing that even more carefully, given some time over the next week to do so. And I know Kathy had mentioned that she missed the first 40 minutes of the meeting. I just want, as I noted earlier, the vast majority of those increases are contractual and not up for any unilateral action by the town. Certainly, part of any process would be discussing that with the union. But the town, the select board does have the ability to change level of service with impact bargaining with the unions. So that is the approach right now that's on the table. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll certainly take a look at those ideas that have come forward, but most of them would not have any immediate impact on the FY21 budget situation. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might, I think that was kind of the point I was trying to get at. If we sit down and go through the actual proposal, because it's already been developed, we can give feedback to the team, ask them to go relook at this or that, to keep the activity focused and not to be running in a lot of different directions at once. So I want folks to understand that there is a 5% reduction proposal for municipal services that we have seen. We just need to go through it so that we can give specific feedback about specific ideas. And if we as a board want to see them changed, then we can do that. And the conversation from my point of view with FinCom and the school committee is about getting people to agree on an approach. And if this approach is the right way to go, knowing that it's, there's no perfect answer, then we can all move forward and present to the town a budgetary proposal for the June town meeting, which we hope will work, and then make adjustments as we go forward. So I don't want folks to think that we haven't produced some real proposals up till now, because we have.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of kicking the can down the curb by any shot. So why don't we plan on meeting, I guess, on Monday if the people who are going to have to produce these numbers and defend and explain them feel that with this additional feedback today that that they're going to be in a position to do so. And then we can go through as a group and just make it an exclusive agenda only to the budget. And then there won't be any other things that are pushed off or rushed through, but will be exclusively focused on the budget. Does that sound fine? Yes. Mr. picture, Jermaine. I'm looking for your picture.
Yes.
Is that a yes? Okay.
Yes.
So we'll convene a time. We'll communicate our availability.
Let's do it at 4 o'clock so Pete can't come.
That sounds just great. I knew I could get support all the way through.
So we'll coordinate a time and we'll announce it through the town administrator's office and post it on the town Facebook page. Does that sound good?
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everybody. I want to acknowledge that the reason that we spent this much time is because it is a difficult conversation, but I know that we've trimmed at least one agenda item from tonight, and the others are some fairly straightforward business transactions. So we'll move right along to approval of, is our treasurer on? Do I see Jennifer? Is she with us?
I am.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Jennifer Scannell, our town treasurer, has the next two items, agenda items 20099 and 2100. We're flicking the clock here. DPW bond anticipation note and another transaction thereafter. Jennifer, you have the floor.
Okay, good evening. So the first one is the bond anticipation note. I'm asking the board to approve the sale of a $500,000 bond anticipation note that is maturing on May 20th, 2021 with an interest rate of 1.95%. This is a new note for the project known as the DPW Facility Construction, Renovation, and Remodeling. I am asking the board, obviously, to approve this sale. There is a 1.5-page vote of the select board. If you didn't want to read that, there is a suggested motion that is included in the memo to the board.
Yes, I believe we received instructions from bond counsel that the clerk has to read whatever motion is to be read.
So the clerk does not have to read the vote of the select board. He can read a motion, a suggested motion as follows, to adopt the votes prepared by bond counsel in connection with the town's $500,000 bond anticipation note that sold on May 5th, 2020. Or he can choose to read the vote in its entirety.
No, I think just read it as you just read it. And I think it'll be just, I move that we adopt the votes prepared by bond counsel in connection with the town's $500,000 bond anticipation note that sold on May 5th, 2020.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'll second, but I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
Just a comment, and maybe it is, I think it's, the treasurer did read what the terms are. I think it's probably just good for us to repeat those. And there's another item here in the vote that I want to make sure that folks are aware of. The board is authorizing our members to do an electronic signing of the documents that are required. This is something that we haven't had the authority to do before. We haven't voted to do it in the past, but we are voting to do that for this particular transaction, which of course may help us down the road. But for this point in time, we're doing two things. One is authorizing the vote, the borrowing, and also authorizing us to utilize electronic signature.
Do we want to read then what the $500,000 bond anticipation note? How much of that?
I was just pointing out what the vote says.
I understand. It's just a very long, it's a full page to be read at 1.95%. I think it's already been noted.
Right. Madam Chair, my point simply was, for purposes of discussion, that's what the thing says. Mm-hmm. I don't want to change the motion either.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the $500,000 bond at a rate of, what is it, 1.59?
1.95.
1.95%. And can we do this as the same motion and to execute that approval with electronic signature?
That is in the vote that was given. So I would say we can do it.
Yep.
It's all part of the...
All right, so do we want to say that motion's been made?
Yes, so poll the board, I think.
Yeah, poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes?
Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. Motion is approved as read. And our treasurer has the next motion.
So I think Karen's going to put up Exhibit A for the people at home to see.
Yes, it's up, Jen.
What's that?
I did put it up, Jen, so that's on there.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So Exhibit A represents surplus bond proceeds from completed capital projects. All of these projects were authorized at previous town meetings. Funds have been borrowed, and expenses have been paid. What remains is the difference between the amount borrowed and actually spent to complete each purpose. So what I'm asking the board is, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, for the board to vote to transfer the surplus amount of borrowed funds, which the total, as you can see in Exhibit A, is $84,331, and that's from 5 capital projects previously authorized and completed. So I'm asking the board to vote to transfer the surplus amount of borrowed funds associated with each of these completed projects to the debt service account to pay for principal and interest. And there is, again, a suggested motion that I did include in your package. I'll take any questions if you have.
I think we ought to, I believe anyway, at least identify what these projects were and the amounts involved in the projects, Madam Chair. Do you want me to read them, or?
Please, that would be great.
We have reconstruction of Acorn Street. It was approved in 2005 in Article 27 in the amount of $18,528.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? That's the $18,528 is the balance that remains. That is not the amount that was authorized at town meeting.
That is correct. These are all dealing with the balance remaining.
Correct.
Which all added up will be the $84,331. Causeway Street culvert improvement from November 2nd, 2009, Article 11 at the time, remaining $8,947. Flood-proof Dover pump station from May 12th, 2011, Article 19, and the amount of remaining of $48,666. Replace the VMB boiler as of November 4th, 2013, Article 9, remaining $5,235. And DPW vehicles and equipment, November 2nd, 2015, from Article 25, $2,955 remaining. In total, those add up to $84,331 to return to the general fund.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask the treasurer or the finance director, where does this money go?
So I'm asking the board to transfer the $84,331 to the debt service account to pay principal and interest in this fiscal year. And then any excess amount left in that account that was originally budgeted for principal and interest for debt service will eventually flow to free cash. There is still a balance.
Yeah, that was my question. So ultimately, it's utilized to pay debt service for the current year, which is good news, and it will potentially provide some relief next year because it'll flow through to free cash.
Correct.
That's an important. So none of the numbers we saw in our earlier conversation include this $85,000.
No.
Because we don't have the free cash.
Not certified at this point.
Oh, this is a positive development, certainly. I'm sure it's totally because of the hard work of our treasurer collector. Second.
It is.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I second
it. So I will poll the board to move the surplus bond proceeds as proposed by the treasurer. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes, it's been unanimously approved, and we thank the treasurer. And I think it's really important for the community to know that when we're looking at these numbers, none of them are rounded. They go down to the penny. So there is meticulous attention to detail on this. Moving right along, thank you very much, Jennifer. Moving right along, we have three agenda items, 101, 102, 103, all led in some combination by the DPW Director, Jim McKay, two with our Town Administrator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the first is an update on the wells 1 and 2 with the meetings with the DEP. Myself and the Town Administrator had Zoom meetings with several members of the DEP, and at the last meeting, things weren't going quite as well as we would have hoped. But at our last meeting, with discussions on the transfer station, things are starting to turn a little better for the town with this report. The landfill itself was retested last Thursday, and that included the the homeowners' wells and the outside perimeter areas that were tested, that the PFAS showed up. The wells will be tested, wells 1 and 2, the raw water and the treatment facility will be tested this Thursday. Wells 1 and 2 still remain offline, and at this time, it was decided between, Kathy Lynn has been a great help as the director of the Board of Health to myself and the Town Administrator. She's helped us a lot through this process, and it was decided that we should move forward with the Mass DEP is paying for all of these tests. We'll test the rest of our well systems. Most of them will just be the treatment itself at well 3, 5 and 6, and 4. And that will be done either this Wednesday or Thursday of this week. And then when we get the final results, it was recommended, again, myself and the Town Administrator and our Kleinfelder engineers, that maybe we should have a meeting set aside once we get all these results back with a joint meeting of, I would suggest a joint meeting of the Finance Committee, the Board of Health, and the Select Board, naturally. So these reports can be given, and they will have staff there that will be able to answer these questions. And if there's any need to move forward with any more testing or any type of disinfectant that needs to be put into the wells or anything like that. And that's about all I have for that.
So is this actually a heads up that this is an FY21 budget item that needs a placeholder, or where do you see this heading?
At this point, we don't. We don't see that at all. If anything, it would have to wait till the November town meeting, and any type of work to remediate anything with the homeowner, that would be done through the DPW itself, if anything has to be done.
But we, as a town, would not be waiting until that town meeting to take action for something that's as important as corrective action to water, correct?
Until we get all the test results back for the remaining wells, we don't see there is no problem whatsoever at this time. The MCL at the treatment facility at wells 1 and 2 are below the levels that the DEP has set forth. It's just been it's the right time of year, so we can run all our other wells and just keep wells 1 and 2 offline. And it was just, that's how it was decided between ourselves and the DEP to do it that way. And if something pops up, it could. I mean, but we don't know at this moment right now.
Does anybody have any questions for the DPW director with respect to this update? This has been going on for about a month now, correct?
Yes.
Any other comments, questions from my colleagues? No? Okay, I think absent any questions, we'll move to the next agenda item, which are as part of the DPW department restructuring efforts. Agenda item 101.
If I may, just to start.
Please.
The Department of Public Works, as the board is aware, as part of the negotiations we held with the DPW Workers Union, we established 3 new positions within the department. And the superintendent, the DPW director, and I had interviews with several individuals from the department, and we both agree that the 3 individuals listed within your packet are the 3 individuals that are best for these positions and will do well. And the town is lucky to have these folks on board. If I may, Madam Chair, if the director has any comments in regards to the individuals themselves before we put forward the names for actual appointment.
Please.
Thank you. I just want to note, these are not 3 new positions. These are positions that were within the DPW itself. So we're not hiring 3 people to replace them. These are just upgrades, and that the survey that was done for the DPW, they also concur that this is a good thing for the DPW to start in this process. So I would ask that the town administrator ask, I guess, the board to appoint David Romaci as the Department of Public Works Superintendent. David's worked with us for over, I'd say, almost 9+ years. He is right now as the general foreman at the DPW. And I definitely, do you want to do this individually or all 3 at the same time?
I think you do them all at the same time, unless my colleagues feel differently. It's all bundled together as part of a whole restructure.
And I would ask that Ron McKinney, Ron McKinney, be appointed as Water and Sewer Superintendent. Ron took over from one of the long-time standing people that ran the water and sewer system, and he learned from Alex, and Ron is probably one of the most knowledgeable people in this industry and business for our water and sewer system, and I have no problem with Ron taking over as Water and Sewer Superintendent. And Ron's worked here also from his, I would say, 13+ years. And then we would ask that we place Kevin Candola as the facilities manager. Kevin's worked here for almost 16 years. And what the title of the facilities manager, it would be he would take over all the facilities that the DPW have. Right now we have, I would say, almost 30 sites outside between water, sewer, general aspects, the cemetery, and he would oversee all those buildings. And especially with the new facility being built at the DPW, someone's going to have to take care and manage that, where the DPW office will remain at the town hall. And it's just, part of the recommendation from the report was that we should also include a facilities manager, so that someday that the town would have all buildings under one jurisdiction under the facilities manager.
All right. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? I think those of us who have had the opportunity to interact with these folks, I know I did over the past year, they're all incredibly professional in the way that they present themselves, and you can tell that they're very committed to the town. Does anybody have any comments or questions for the DPW director? My colleagues or beyond? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, if I may, just
Yes.
I'd like to formally request that the board ratify my appointment of David Romaci as the Department of Public Works Superintendent, Ronald McKinney as the Water and Sewer Superintendent, and Kevin Candola as the Facilities Manager.
We have a second?
Second.
You can't make the motion. One of us has to make the motion.
Sorry.
We have to.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
that I would like to make the motion that the board approve the town administrator's appointment of David Romaci, Department of Public Works Superintendent, Ron McKinney, Water and Sewer Superintendent, Kevin Canola as a Facilities Manager. And if I could, after the second, I'd like to speak to it. because I couldn't find the unmute button before.
I'll second that, and I also want to speak to it for a moment. So.
Okay, gentlemen, you have the floor.
Yes, I want to commend the DPW director and the town administrator, as well as my colleague, who's the chair, because a lot of this groundwork was laid through negotiation with the union as well as the management. So this is one of those situations where the union and the management team came together, adopted a contract, and enables us to deploy a organizational structure that will help us do a better job for the public, and also to continue to develop our folks in the department and give them new opportunities and new opportunities to show their value to the citizens of the town. So congratulations to all of you for that effort.
I just want to concur with what my colleague just said and what Madam Chair said, but I also want to point out I have met with these individuals on any number of occasions, and they are a credit to the town, as is our DPW director. So I have no qualms, and I feel very good about the fact that we've given them the opportunity to take on more responsibility. I think it's great.
Yeah, I will say through this process that the function called DPW is extremely scientific, extremely rigorous for federal and state mandated regulations, and the level of precision that we are expecting the DPW and his trusted lieutenants to provide for the town with respect to manpower planning against the enterprise budgets all requires a very strong attention to detail. So it's been moved and seconded to support this nomination, and so I hear Kevin has joined us and is just muted. I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. It's been unanimously accepted that we essentially elevate David Ramachi, Ronald McKenney, and Kevin Candola to their expanded positions within the Millis DPW with our gratitude and thanks and congratulations. So Kevin, congratulations, since I see your name. Is there any, Kevin, would you like to say anything to the town? That requires an unmute. I'm going to take that as a no thank you.
Madam Chair, maybe when...
Oh, there he is.
There I am. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Well, I've seen you in action, and you know that be careful what you wish for, because there's a ton of work. So we're glad we're in capable hands, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
One
it.
comment I might make is you never have to thank somebody for that. You earn it, and you have certainly earned it.
Well, thank you again. It's very flattering.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next appointment, we would ask that these are just reappointments for summer help. They are fully aware that this is, who knows what's going to happen on July 1st. These are funds that are still in the FY20 budget to pay these salaries through June 30th. So I would ask that the board reappoint Dan Garcieri and Benjamin Potensky. And I know I just murdered Dan's name, but Dan has worked here. This is his 4th summer coming back. And Ben I think this is his 3rd summer coming back for us this year. And I guess I would have to, Mr. Kaczynski, it would start on May 12th, and it would end on September 30th, and they both have to go for their physicals and drug screening.
Very good. Madam Chair,
Please.
I recommend that the board ratify my appointments of Dan Garaci and Benjamin Potensky as seasonal summer help, starting on May 12th, 2020, and ending September 30th, 2020.
Is there somebody who would like to restate that motion, please, from the board?
Madam Chair, I guess I'd like to ask, just so I make sure we understand, that I don't want these folks to be brought on board and not understand that there is some risk here. That we certainly have the money to pay them through June 30th. We may not have the ability to do that depending on the budget deliberation after June 30th. So they're well aware of that, I assume.
Yes, they were. Yes, they are.
So I feel more comfortable with a motion that made the summer appointment and not having necessarily an end date. Is that reasonable, or I ask for the town administrator or the director?
Well, I hadn't thought about that.
We could make it subject to funding availability or something like that.
Yeah, I believe the date with funding.
Meeting appropriate.
All right, so then I make a motion that the board approve the town administrator's appointment of Dan Garaci and Benjamin Butensky as summer help for the DPW, subject to available funding for the period beginning May 12th and ending September 30th, and subject to physical and drug testing.
Second.
So moved. I will poll the board for this motion. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes?
Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Almost renamed you.
That's
Ms.
okay.
Barnes?
That's okay.
And Ms. Barnes, yes, this is moved and approved with the contingencies that have been enumerated. Thank you very much. Skipping the next item by request of the ZBA and moving to the town administrator's recommendation of a new member for the MBTA advisory board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening, I'd like to request that the board vote to appoint Robert Weiss as the town's representative to the MBTA advisory board. I am currently the representative, but based on Mr. Weiss's role, I think he is far more fit and appropriate to be the one representing the town on this board. So I am willing to tender my resignation from that particular position to make way for Mr. Weiss. So I'd ask that the board vote to make that appointment.
I'm happy to make a motion that we accept the resignation with regret of Michael Kaczynski as the MBTA's advisory board member representing the town of Millis, and to appoint at his recommendation Bob Weiss, our economic development director, to that position. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm going to poll the board.
May I make a comment?
Please.
How many positions does Mr. Weiss now hold in the town?
Don't tell him. He will. Maybe he won't notice.
Many.
We'll have to take account. I can't take my head.
We're trying
Every month is a new card.
Bob's doing a great job for us.
Yeah.
I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes, with our thanks. I'm curious if you could, in the context, just as one comment, Mr. Kaczynski, could you report to the community the role, both the monetary contribution and the role of the advisory board member, where everybody, it's no surprise to anybody, we do not have direct MBTA service. I think people would be interested to know that we nonetheless have an annual budget line item that's marked MBTA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I don't have that line item right in front of me. I do believe and understand that it's not actually an item that's voted by town meeting insofar that it's listed on an actual budget. It is what they call a cherry sheet where they gain a part of our state aid to go towards the MBTA, cherry sheet assessment. I believe that amount is approximately $40,000 per year, but we can get confirmation on that. And those funds are our contribution to the MBTA because we are a town that borders a town that is on a commuter rail line. And as such, and as a contributor to the MBTA, we do have are allowed a seat on the advisory board. So I think having Mr. Weiss become an active member attending those, we will be able to gather better information and to have some additional advocacy for Millis and its transportation needs.
I think the Director of Finance, I saw her pop up. Were you going to add something, Carol?
I was just going to confirm that the FY21 preliminary charge sheet estimate for the MBTA is $39,307.
I was close.
Exactly. Nice job.
Mayor, if I could ask a question?
Please.
And I don't know what insight we have on this. Certainly, we would like to get more bang for our buck. But in addition to that, does anyone have any comment on what role the advisory board will be playing in, if we think the municipality has a tough road ahead of it? The MBTA is going to have so many issues and problems because of, the need to continue to social distance and whatnot. I hope you do a good job, Bob, but you folks, I think, are going to have quite a challenge. That's for sure.
It is, and I know Madam Chair, that the Department of Transportation is looking at a 30-year plan right now for $40 billion to restore the region's transportation, especially around the commuter rails, make it more accessible. So, yes, they do have quite a challenge. And I think Mr. McCaffrey is right with the challenges now with social distancing and with people who, as you have probably read, the MBTA is down ridership by 95%. So they've got quite a ways to go to come back, though I think it will, and we need to be part of that, that's for certain.
Excellent. Well, any advocacy we can do on the public transportation front would be tremendous. We are down to our last two agenda items. The first, I'm going to let Mr. Kaczynski introduce the first one, which is to approve and sign the town election warrant. I understand that the ballots are in, and they're in the process of going out in the mail for those people who have reached out either by calling 376-7046 to request them, or to have sent an email to townclerk@millisma.gov to do the same, so that there is a push by the town clerk's office to do early balloting or early voting. There is a push by the town clerk's office to do early voting. Somebody has me on. Somebody has me on. Okay, Mr. Kaczynski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the board does every year, the board needs to approve the warrant for the annual town election. The warrant itself is in your packet, and it outlines the date of the election as the Monday, the 15th day of June 2020, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. For the citizens to cast their votes in the annual town election for the candidates for the following offices: moderator for 1 year, town clerk for 3 years, select board for 3 years, school committee, 2 members for 3 years, board of health for 3 years, library trustee for 3 years, planning board for 5 years, constables 2 for 3 years, and housing authority for 5 years. So I submit that for the board's consideration and approval.
Is there any discussion, or do we have a motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I would like the board to consider correspondence we have received from the election warden with some information for us to consider, and also to potentially consider moving the date to the 22nd. The letter that all the members of the board received indicated that there was substantial concern from the election warden and I believe others in the town clerk's office that after there was outreach to those folks who man the polls, there was a substantial concern among the folks who typically go that to do that work, that they are reluctant to do it. So there was a request that we received from the town election warden to consider moving the election date back another week, just to provide us with a little bit more, I would say, daylight between whatever the governor does on the 18th of May and having our election held in June.
Anybody have any other comments or questions with respect to this?
I would like, Madam Chair, I would like to hear if the election warden has anything to say on this subject.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, I'm requesting this because of the worry of our workers over the virus that's taking place. They feel that extra time would be helpful. We don't have a full complement of workers who have said that they would work on the May election or the June election now. So we have maybe 19 workers instead of 30. So if we can move it back another week to the 22nd, hopefully we can get more workers. The town clerk is actually working on that, trying to get workers, extra workers from town employees that are not working, teachers that are not working, possibly college students that are home. And we just need a little more time to get the election in order. Thank you.
I actually did some research on this and inquired to state legislators and other towns, and I got somewhat of a pushback, basically for the reason that you cited, Mrs. McCaffrey, that between college students being home, people who have been laid off and underemployed, paid town employees for whom the town hall office hours have been staggered intentionally to maintain some safety, logistical safety. And as recently as I just found on the CDC website, there's a whole polling protocol recommendation package, which even includes doing drive-through type or drive-by type voting. I know we personally requested our ballots through email. And I guess my question is really twofold. I'm not going to pretend to be the election expert. I will tell you that the board was really thoughtful in two respects. One is the reality that when in our current sequence, which we will have a bylaw to put before town meeting to change, putting the election 1 week away from town meeting, especially this particular town meeting, gives very little time for the newly elected members of the Finance Committee, the Select Board, the new moderator, to really both get up to speed in terms of what their required duties are, but also to really own the substance of the budget over which they really didn't have a major hand in creating because they are new. So the thought was that if we had 2 weeks versus one, that we would be granting and trying to build in more training time. So that was the first thing. And the second thing that was asked of me was, and of course I'm not Nostradamus, and I don't think anybody on this call is unless they're hiding that from us, but I don't know that 1 week is going to necessarily make a difference, and I'm wondering if we can be more effective as a community to keep it on track where we'd already set the election date once and moved it once, and now we have ballots that are printed on the 15th. So I raise those as concerns about moving the date because I can't believe that we can't find these other people in an amount of time that would give you as the election warrant the ability to provide good training and as well as to figure out some of these other logistical items. But I'm not going to pretend to know what that work realistically entails. I'm just looking at the picture and the lack of confusion that we would hopefully avoid if we stuck with the 15th.
I understand that. We are trying to take as many precautions as we possibly can, not me personally, the town clerk's office, during the election itself. And with gloves and masks plastic or not plastic, I'm trying to think of the word, the plastic shields over the face, protectors in front of the workers at the front and back tables, disinfecting the voting booths. And we need people to do all of these things. And with the limited number we have, we don't have enough for us to feel that they're really safe. So having the election on the 22nd, giving us an extra week to, I guess, get our ducks in a row, to get the proper number of workers. And that's especially if the polls are open from 7 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. We always work with 2 shifts. And given the reluctance of the election workers, the town clerk's office has talked about having more shifts, maybe 3 shifts, 3 shorter shifts or 4 shorter shifts, because we have all kinds of concerns about feeding the election workers.
Right.
So all of that is still being considered for whenever the election is scheduled.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry.
I'm very concerned with what you're saying, and I'm supportive of it. But I have another concern that is a number of our election workers are, say, in my age group, a little on the elderly side.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a concern about them even serving in that situation. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't think it's wonderful that they're willing to do so, but everything we've learned about COVID-19 thus far is that it seems to be attacking the elderly more severely, I think is the best way to put it, than most of the other generations of individuals. I am concerned about our ability to find people to man the election area, if you will, the booths, the hallways, whatever the areas are. So that is a concern to me. I'd feel much more comfortable if we had younger people doing all of that at this time. It's just a personal feeling. I don't mean to express it. I don't hope I'm not denigrating anyone. I don't intend to this way, but I would feel more comfortable if we could do it. In terms of the date, I'm one of those who advocated for the 15th. As I understand it, the date can be printed on the ballot, but given what's been going on, you can change the date and you don't have to change the ballots. But I have to find out. I may be speaking off the top of my head. Kathy, I see you're on.
Madam Chair, you do not have to change the date on the ballot.
No.
You have 30 days from the date that's printed on the ballot. So it gives us 30 days. And I agree with you 100% with the age of our election workers and the ability to bring them in and put them at risk of, possibly being exposed to somebody who wants to come in and vote is a huge concern to all of us.
Okay. And given all of that, if what you're telling me, both of you at least, is that you really need the extra time to get more people, younger people in and trained, I'll be more flexible than I would have been otherwise on this. But I just wanted to express my concerns in this area.
I have a question, I think, both for Chris or for Kathy or Lisa, the people who are on the front lines of election planning, which is, could we use this as a venue to do some recruitment, since a week from the 15th isn't going to change the crux of the problem, which is that our traditional profile of election worker, traditionally by deliberate, I don't know. We're not usually in a situation where we have college seniors at home. We're not usually in a situation where we have people who are unemployed, who maybe just would like to get out of the house, or underemployed. And I'm just wondering if we used this venue and we posted through the Millis Facebook page a recruitment notice, that what might end up happening is, because I haven't seen any outreach to do that, but it's possible that I missed it, But if we could maybe take a week to do some outreach and then see what the net results of that are, you might find that you address both of the issues, that you don't have the worry about the density of the senior-aged election worker who is, in fact, at an at-risk question, and as well as we might have an opportunity to fortify beyond that. And I know that there may, in fact, be a question about, maybe there's an unemployment benefit issue if somebody is paid as an election worker, and I'm not going to legislate on that. But I'm just wondering if I don't know when you actually start your training, but I'm curious as to whether or not we could take a week and with an effort of doing both, which is to perhaps mitigate the risk of the traditional election worker, and also utilize town employees who have been deliberately staggered in how they have come in for in-town hall shifts. Maybe I'm just wondering if there's more that can be done to preserve the 15th and to keep that on track.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I agree. I understand what you're saying. We have talked to some of the town hall employees right now, and we wear masks in the hallway now. We do a lot of that. They're concerned. They're also concerned about being exposed to the public. I tried with Marianne Ziemba and Bob Mulaney last year to get people to come to the presidential primary so I could have some high school kids get involved. And through lots of recruitment, we got 3 kids that came. They were wonderful, but we only had 3. I know things are a little different now. Kids are out of school and that, but I have a problem with the training too. I mean, we're going to be very close to them training one-on-one, side by side, trying to train all these new people. And that's a concern of mine as well.
I have a question where the CDC has actually outlined the construct of a call it a drive-through, drive-by, some sort of a drive and drop voting mechanism. Are we looking at new ways to handle this beyond the early balloting? And does the early balloting have to be mailed, or could it be dropped off?
It does have, Madam Chair, it does have to be mailed. We do, but now we're not, we'll do the application and the ballot together to save time. So Karen sent out an email blast today, and I think we received about 25 or 30 emails within an hour's time frame for absentee ballots, which Sue, Lisa, and I will do. We'll get them out as early as tomorrow or the next day, and we'll try to do everything that way. The drive-by, we haven't really thought about that, because if there's 2 people in a car and different precincts, and that the logistics seem a little overwhelming to do on June 15th. We will do everything, and we always have done everything that we can to make sure if there's someone who needs a ballot or something, Lisa has driven the ballot to the home for anyone who's done things, but we still have to follow all the guidelines from the Secretary of State's office from the election and make sure we do everything properly. Where this is a contested race, we want to make sure we have 3 contested races, that we do everything by the book.
Nobody's advocating other than that, I don't think.
Oh, no, I know. I'm just saying that the logistics of trying to do the drive-by and things like that outside with the weather and not having, computers outside to make sure they're a registered voter if they're not on the list. There's a lot of different things that come into play. We have discussed it many times as to would that be an option.
It seems to me that if the federal government is putting it out there for consideration, I would feel much more responsible. I don't want to be asked about it by a resident to say, gee, have you seen that the CDC is encouraging this? Mm-hmm. That would be, really important. I don't know what a week is going to do for the difference of how you train. You indicated that you're nervous about being close to somebody in terms of training. And I don't know if John McVeigh is still on to say how he feels a week's difference is going to be. I don't know if Mr. McVeigh is still on this call. So, I kind of defer to or Kathy Lannon if they think a week is going to be different. We were trying to do 2 things. We're trying to get, widespread participation in adverse conditions. And we were also, and what this will absolutely do is we will not have the training time for the people who have to manage the town meeting itself, assuming that the town meeting continues on the 29th. Those were the 2 things that the board had expressly tried to provide for this process.
And Madam Chair, I understand, and I completely understand your thoughts. I just, it's just a difficult time to think about running an election with not knowing how many people. Will we have 200? Will we have 600? It's just such a difficult thing to predict and to prepare for and try to do that. And actually, two of our youngest election workers have chosen not to work. So it's not just our, on the realm. So we're really challenged being open, 12 hours and having a very limited staff. And most of our wardens and clerks are choosing not to work. And those are our strong people that know how to run the election. So we're put in quite a challenging position. Like everyone else, I know we're not alone in this, but we're trying to make sure that we do everything properly and we have enough people to run the election without, most of our seasoned people have chosen not to work because of the scare of the virus. So it's quite challenging for us.
I would like to see more effort to recruit more people. I think you've indicated that there's a problem, and I personally haven't. I'm pretty out there in terms of and aware, and I know I provided actually artwork for early balloting. I haven't seen it posted to the Facebook page. Maybe it's newly posted, but I made it last week. I gave a list of all the different possible channels on which it could be used. Now, this was specific to early balloting. It seems to me that artwork could be easily modified to recruit election workers, and I think that we owe it to the town, especially there are people who would like to work and don't have that opportunity. I think it's really important for us to widen our reach. If we do this, we are going back on our pledge to provide more learning time. So that's the only thing I want to say.
Okay. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Could I just say something? As we all want to protect the citizens of Millis, be it the workers or the voters. And I know it seems that 1 week is not going to make a difference, but as we sit and watch the news night after night and we see the numbers thankfully going down of the people who have been getting the virus, I feel that giving the town an extra week to protect our voters and to protect our workers, there'll be hopefully fewer people who are impacted by the virus by changing it a week. And I agree with Kathy Smith. We do have to train them, and we have to there's a lot of things in trying to figure out the timing, how many, as I said before, how many sessions we're going to have. If we only have a limited number, I think Mr. McCaffrey last week had said something about that we needed workers to help out with the election. And from what I understand from talking to the town clerk, there were no calls coming in asked for people saying that they would be willing to work. So if we can get the extra workers, I'd be happy to get them in and get them trained. But I'm not optimistic.
It sounds to me like there needs to be a greater effort somehow on the part of the town to encourage residents to participate in the election process itself, to assist you as a warden. And if the extra week buys you that time, and I have a feeling that what we're dealing with also is a perception, right or wrong, but that says, okay, every week gives me a little more distance from the potential for getting the virus. And if that's what's necessary to get more people on board, I'm willing to consider it. But I'd like to hear from my other colleagues too, Mr. McCaffrey. So,
Madam Chair, I'd like to speak at some point, Lisa.
Yeah, please do.
There's several issues. One is that all of our election workers are town employees, and we cannot discriminate on the basis of age. So we cannot tell people that they're too old to work. So we are encouraging them actually to not work if they feel like they have any kind of underlying health issue or if they just feel not comfortable working. And there's still among the people who agreed that they would work, there are some people that I have concerns about, and I So I think the number is actually going to go down. I did ask if we got some volunteer, some new people to work for this one time, it was possible to just hire them as contract workers rather than actually having to go through all the paperwork to hire them as town employees. And I was told no. So that could affect some of the people who are currently getting unemployment or are on disability or something. I don't know if they now have a quote unquote real job, even though it's only for 4 hours. That's one issue in terms of getting people. One more week that's all we can get is 1 more week. I think it's crucial to try and get as much time as possible on the downward slope of this pandemic.
I have a question. Can people volunteer? I mean, if I'm a civics major, I'm going to a local university and I'm home, do I have to be paid? Can I be a volunteer because doing so is going to be a resume item and it's going to give me some exposure to town government, just as would an internship?
Yeah, absolutely, you could volunteer, but it's out there now that we pay $12.75. So, and a lot of people, probably need the money. So I don't know. I will ask people if they'd be willing to volunteer.
And I provided artwork. I mean, I did provide, just so everybody understands, I did provide some artwork. I'm not married to it. I did it to accelerate this tool for you guys, and I gave you a list of, I think, 7 different either, signs or media channels on which to use to do outreach about the election. This was specific to early ballots again, but it could be easily adapted. And I don't know if it was used or not used. I don't think it was used, so maybe you could speak to that. If you want to redo it. But, I tried to give you a head start. I just used PowerPoint. There's nothing glorious about that.
It has not been used yet. As you know, the town clerk's IT department is very small, and we haven't had the ability to get it out anywhere yet. We need help with that. In terms of the 2-week period that the new member of the select board would need, the newest member of the select board does not have to answer any questions at the town meeting. Week has traditionally, since the last 100 years, has been fine for that. The finance committee is not elected, so those are all new, all the same people anyway. I'm confident that the new moderator can handle whatever comes before her. In terms of the issue of drive-by balloting that the CDC is promoting, elections are run by each state, and drive-by balloting is not approved for the state of Massachusetts. And it, as far as I know, is not going to be before the end of June. So basically what we need is, we're asking for another week to try and reach out and get people to either volunteer or work, and then we have to, and then train them. And it's a process that takes several weeks, so it's not something, even if we started tomorrow, we wouldn't know if we had anyone by next Monday.
So just so I should say that I have 7 volunteers that have just texted me in the time that we've been talking about this. So there must be people that are watching this at home and postponing their dinners to do that.
I'd be happy to send me their names and numbers, so I'll call them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you cut out. Okay. How would everybody like to proceed here?
Madam Chair?
Yep.
Obviously, I have some interest in this, and I want to make sure everybody understands that I happen to know the warden very well.
And the fact that the warden has to call you Mr. McCaffrey is a point that we need to discuss at a future date.
Sure that there will be other...
we're very formal.
But, from my point of view, it's fairly straightforward. There's an issue for our workers on the front line who've asked us for a little relief so that they feel the most comfortable they can feel in terms of this pandemic. And what we give up is relatively small. So I would favor moving the date.
You want to make a motion to that effect?
I will. So, knowing that there is, well, I'll just make the motion. I move that the board accept the recommendation of the town clerk's office to move the election date for the town of Millis to June 22nd.
I'll second it with the full knowledge of the relationship between the board and yourself.
We'll poll the board. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. Mr. McCaffrey, not to be confused with Jim.
Well, I would be more than happy to abstain. Since the vote is...
Are you accusing yourself?
The motion passes in the majority, 2-1 abstention, and there's going to have to be some outreach, I guess is what I would say to the town clerk's office, that between early balloting, which I know was the thrust of your campaign effort, I just think that, I think Mr. Kaczynski, I would like to make a request that some technology training be something that is incorporated in town hall so that there's much more comfort with basic programs like PowerPoint. Excel is probably one too, because if that's the holdup on getting the word out, that shouldn't be happening, I don't think.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Could I just think we're comfortable with the programs. It's getting them online somehow. That's the problem.
All right, but I thought every department had training in that respect.
So I noticed today that you got a bulletin out, so there must be somebody who's able to do that.
It's not our department.
Okay.
I assume that was a listserv distribution, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
All right, so this is going to be really important because we're changing the date for the third time. So it's really important that we do an effective job. We don't want to hear from the community after the fact that we didn't tell them and that our outreach was insufficient. So that effort has to be really driven by the town clerk's office, I think, both for recruitment of election workers, which you're saying is urgent, as well as for voters to understand. So we leave that in your capable hands. Thank you. And yep.
I just want to confirm that people will be receiving a ballot that says June 15th on it. It is still good on the following Monday, June, what is it? June 22nd. And also, are you, can you still vote to approve the warrant with the revised date?
Yes, I make a motion that we approve the election warrant with the revised date of June 22nd.
Second. You're muted.
Oh,
No.
sorry. What I said in mute was I will, it's moved and seconded to change the warrant accordingly, and I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes? Yes. So we look forward to saying to the community as a whole, you have an opportunity to participate in 3 ways in your town government within the next 5 weeks. The first is to seek an early ballot. The second is to consider participating as a trained poll worker with great deference given to social distancing and public health safety. And the third is that everybody who hears my voice or is watching TV should be online completing their 2020 census. With that, I'm going to move to our final agenda item with the thanks of everybody concerned on this issue. And ask if the clerk could read the Water Sewer Department commitment for 2020.
And they are hereby required to levy and collect from the several persons named in the utility billing list herewith, committed to you the amount of the utility charges assessed to each person on the water sewer services to include capital assessment charges that set forth below with interest and miscellaneous charges, the sum total being of such list being, and I'm just going to read the final sum total, $2,186.68. And to exercise all powers conferred by the laws of Massachusetts.
Just reference the date.
April 2020.
April 2020. I apologize, I left that off.
Second. Unfortunately, the chair is still on mute. We can't vote without you.
Sorry about that. It's been moved and seconded to approve the Treasurer's Water Sewer Department collection for April 2020. I will pull the board. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. And I was told that we do not have minutes for approval. There is a public invitation to participate in the joint FinCom meeting, Finance Committee meeting, which is Wednesday at 6 o'clock on Zoom. I want to ask the town administrator to please make sure that whatever password was in place as a default setting is either removed or that it's much more visible for people who want to log in. I was one of those people at the most recent FinCom meeting, and I was unable to do so because there was a password in place. I think it's really important. We're trying to stress between our town Facebook page and our website our diligence about being transparent and engaging the community in these discussions that are important. And then if we block them at the front door, that kind of defeats all that effort. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. McCaffrey, do you?
Back. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. With our gratitude, I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. And many of us will be seeing or hearing the community again on Wednesday evening. And we thank you all for your participation and leadership and really ingenious ideas for fiscal 21. Have a safe night. We outlasted the storm, apparently. So that's great. Thank you, Mills Community Media, for making this all happen and Karen behind the scenes. Thank you. Good night, everyone.